What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Binge Empire, part of Bingetown TV's podcast network. So I'm your host today, Kyle. I am joined by Paul, aka Paulicus. And for those of you who are returning from our last week, episode 1 and 2 coverage, you're probably going to be aware we are down a man. So Luke, aka Luciatus, he had some dental trouble. Jupiter gave him some dental trouble this week. So he's on the IR, just the two of us here. But we've got a snowy Sunday in Philadelphia. It is the first week of the fantasy playoffs. The Birds play in a few hours. But the most important thing happening is this conversation. Paul and I are going to go through episode 3 of the House of Ashur, Unworthy. Paul, before we get into everything, is there anything you want to throw out here before we just kind of jump in to breaking this episode down?
I just love this show so much. I mean, the writing, the atmosphere, it's just, I don't know if I'm like dripping with nostalgia and that's why, but I absolutely love sitting down to watch these episodes.
Agreed 100%. And I have two small things, more housekeeping things than anything about the show itself, but just setting some ground rules for the coverage itself. So first thing is going to be, everyone knows, it's not a secret that this is pretty much the horniest, goriest, bloodiest, crassest show on television at the moment. And our podcast will just come with all of the same TVMA warnings that the show itself comes with, as Stars' tagline says, and I love this. It's just, we're all adults here. So we're going to be cursing. We're going to be talking about sex. We're going to be talking about people killing each other. That's just the way it goes. And then secondly, just the way we're actually going to structure this conversation about the episode. This episode, more so than episodes 1 and 2, kind of happened in our opinion, 3 distinct buckets. So that's the way that we're going to do this. We're going to follow characters and locations more so than the chronological order of the scenes themselves. And before we do that, this first scene that we have here is just kind of this immediate reaction to the events at the end of episode 2. Just this conversation between Doctore and Ashur about A, Doctore almost killing Achillea, and then B, Ashur kind of talking about the night before at Gabinius's villa. Short scene, just like some quick interactions here. Just wanted to touch on it in case there was something we wanted to talk deeper about.
I mean, this really sets the whole episode mystery for the viewer. You know, is Chorus turning on Ashur, or is he actually doing the task? And, you know, this makes you think that he could be turning on Ashur because they're screaming at each other. Ashur's like, how dare you put Achillea in harm's way, like using steel? What are you doing? What are you thinking? She is going to be the champion of our house. And Doctore is just like, I needed to. It was the right thing to do. Oh, but you secured a position in the games. And Ashur's like, ooh, maybe not. It didn't exactly go the conversation to plan. So they're like screaming at each other. They're basically saying like, I hate you. I think at one point Doctore big dogs him and says like, on the sands, my word is law, which Ashur was like, you think you're above me? What do you think you're doing there? So really, we've already talked about it. Interesting relationship, so much different than Animeus and Badiatus. And while it does bring in some turbulence like this episode where I'm not really sure it's going to go, I love watching them because just watching them yell back and forth at each other with the cursing that they do is just so fun.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't write down this line. I have a decent amount of quotes written down, but when Doctore is kind of talking to Ashur and he's like, you know, you sound a little indifferent about, you know, like losing Creticus. And he was like, does voice sound indifferent? Like, it's just, he like kind of, I just, like you said, their back and forth is so good. And it's based 100% on this fact that Chorus is not a slave. He is a free man who is being paid by Ashur. So that gives him so much more leeway in these conversations. And it just creates great TV in my mind. I really like their relationship. We'll talk more about it at the end of this episode where we leave off. And kind of once all the events of the episode happen and they kind of meet back up at the villa at the end, just an interesting conversation and kind of things to think about moving forward with how their relationship is going to change. And in my opinion, I would say strengthen moving forward. So now we will move forward ourselves into this first of the 3 buckets. It's just going to be Cossutia basically is the kind of the main part of this. It's two main scenes, really. The first one is going to be the shopping scene. Not a ton of, let's say, plot movement almost, but we get introduced to some new ladies. We get some more Real Housewives of Capua. We're getting these dynamics of where Cossutia fits within the hierarchy of all this. And I think this was really just almost like showing off some dialogue writing skills, because there's a lot of, underhanded compliments, all these types of things are just being tossed around in this conversation.
Yeah, I think Gabinius calls them clucking hens in the market,
Yeah.
but there is some, movement and scheming going on in these conversations. And it's funny to see, the hierarchy of these elite women. And Cossutia, she's getting shots taken at her husband, oh, like senators, they always change and become, I forget what she said, like lesser men or something like that. And Cossutia is like, well, all right, husband, that's a tax collector, like pipe down over
Yeah.
so it's just like they use their husband's titles as basically their title as well. And really interesting interactions. Obviously all the women don't like each other. And then we also really get introduced to Lafrenia is this woman who came to the market. It was like, oh, I didn't know like you guys were here. I would have came if you invited me. And Cossutia is like, oh, it just happened in the moment. And then she talks about, Cossutia talks about the decision that was already made by all the husbands. And Lafrenia is like, well, why wasn't my husband involved? And then Cossutia, another shot saying, your husband's not important enough. So Cossutia is definitely making enemies left and right. And I can't imagine it's going to go well for her.
Yeah, Lafrenia and Cossutia, their kind of verbal sparring was, I would say, probably the centerpiece of this scene, and especially the topic of Viridia and her single marital status. And that was like such a sore point. We know that's a sore point for Cossutia, and it's really something that Lafrenia hits on. That is like the blow it seems like you can toss to Cossutia. So I just liked that went on. But then Cossutia kind of counterpunches with, we're kind of waiting for a more equitable pairing. So yeah. I don't think we're known at this point who Lafrenia's husband is, because we know that Aratus, the kind of the taller-ish woman, I think she might have been also maybe auburn or potentially redheaded. That is Adile Uvius's wife. Mm-hmm. We have, and then Modesta is the tax collector's wife. And I don't think Lafrenia, her husband, rather, his title got tossed around, besides Cossutia just saying he's not important enough. I honestly entered this scene. It felt like Lafrenia was like the highest on the totem pole. The way that she like sauntered up with like the guards and all, you could have convinced me she was like the richest woman in Capua or something like that. So it was just interesting. The writers, I'm sure, had a good time just kind of writing all of these kind of dialogue lines flying back and forth. But then Doctore, the presence of Doctore wandering through the market is what kind of interrupts that conversation. And we just get into this smaller secondary conversation here. Very quick interaction with Doctore and the ladies. But a big takeaway for me, there was really two, but one of them, it was just funny that all the ladies, besides Cossutia, I believe, were like, damn, like I want to get a piece of that ass. Yeah. It was just like, all right, Doctore, let's go, bro.
I loved it. It was so funny. They're like, oh my God, who is this? I am, what was it? I am Modesta, wife of who gives a shit? Like, what's your name? Like, they were all like swooning so hard. It was so funny. And then when Cossutia is obviously ripping into Chorus just for being, working for the Syrian, and Doctore, just being the gentleman he is, says, may your day be blessed, as he walks away. And then all the women are talking about how he was a stud in the arena back in the day. And I was like, ooh, Chorus has got some reputation. I love it.
Now, moving to the secondary piece of info we get here, Cossutia seems to imply that Doctore is gay. I don't feel any type of way about that, but I was just like, oh, okay. I don't think I picked up on any subtle hints of that in one or two, but it felt like there was a lot throughout this episode about that.
I missed that line. Obviously, I know what happens later with Apater and everything like that.
Yeah.
I
don't have it written down, but it was something of like a quote around like his preferences. Basically, like they were all saying like they wanted a piece of ass, and she was like, well, it was like a counterpoint to like, oh, I don't really think he's interested kind of in those. Obviously the language was a lot more flowery and cool with what I just stumbled over, but she kind of gave that impression, or at least I walked away with that
Okay,
impression. All
interesting.
right. So moving forward now within this Cossutia bucket, we're just going to move to the villa. So this conversation that you already brought an interesting line from with Gabinius talking about the clucking hens, but it's going to be Cossutia and Gabinius. They're kind of arguing over Viridia. It seems like this is not the first time they've had this argument about their daughter and kind of what to do with her. And then we get a little bit more information about what Gabinius was thinking with Ashur. We kind of get confirmation of what his plan is in dealing with quote unquote Ashur. And then the last thing we're just going to tackle on that very small scene that happens a little bit later at night during the storm. It's just that Cossutia intercepts this message for Gabinius, and it's like, I'll deal with it. Like, this is below him. And we find out, I would assume, a little bit later what she actually kind of did about that. But that's not the conversation we're going to have. We're just going to stay within the villa and all these kind of conversations that the two of them have.
Yeah, it was. It's funny looking back on it because I know Cossutia is upset Viridia won't leave the villa and come out to the market, but I didn't even realize that Cossutia just got these jabs from Lafrenia about, your daughter. Where is she? Has she left, the villa yet? She hasn't even left the house. And I think that's another reason about why Cossutia comes in so hot. Like, why are you here playing games? You should have been, making an appearance with me to let the people see you. How are you ever going to find a husband and all this stuff? And Gabinius is just like, it's fine. She's, you know,
I love
yeah,
it.
he's just like, dude, let her relax. And it also poses the question, is Viridia like a brilliant strategist? Because she did beat Gabinius in that game. And I don't know if he was letting her to make her feel better or something like that. But Gabinius said himself, he is a master of strategy. So I I don't know if Viridia is hiding this, intelligent talent.
I would love that. I would love an angle to her character being more than just this kind of mourner who has this obsession, let's say. And I would also argue she probably has a right to an obsession with Spartacus. I don't know if they really told us how long it's been since the end of the
That's a good
rebellion,
point.
but the bodies were, still on the crosses crucified. I have no idea to looking at them of being able to tell, like, oh, the body has decayed about this much, but she's mourning her husband who died.
Yeah.
But I like the situation that I like that Gabinius is like a doting father. I just think it's kind of cool. I'm appreciative of that, and I think it's interesting that Cossutia is the one that's like, we need to angle her for position, like we need to use her almost in a way as well, because she's just kind of shirking, let's say, almost the potential that she has as like an asset to the family too. And that's just the way that Cossutia thinks all of the time. We've learned in almost all of the scenes that she's in, she's always angling for something. She's always thinking along those lines. And in addition, that Gabinius as the senator is kind of like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, she's mourning, like, it's okay. Like, he doesn't really seem to care too much that she gets up to what she gets up to. So I just like the relationship it seems like there is between Gabinius and Viridia. But like you mentioned, Cossutia is just like, bro, I'm getting it down at the market right now. Rumors are flying. People are talking. Like, we got to get it going with this. And you are kind of in charge of the games of the Ludi Apollinarius. Perfect opportunity. Like, you need to talk to her to make public appearance for the first time. It's a great way for her to re-enter society. So even more, we know that the games of the Ludi Apollinarius are important for Ashur, and now it's going to be important for Viridia as well. And we all know that Viridia and Ashur have, there's a little bit of a spark there. Luke mentioned it. Luciatis called it out specifically on the last podcast episode that he thinks it writes itself that they kind of get engaged in some type of a romantic relationship. There was another part about Halara in there, which I think we can talk about a little bit later. But even Cossutia is like, you saw the way she looked at Ashur. And he's a snake, so he was probably thinking all about the same thing. So, like, we need to nip that in the bud and get her married ASAP.
Yeah. As soon as they bring up Ashur, even, they clocked it, like you're saying. They know that there's a spark there, and Cossutia just wants to puke. She's like, that's disgusting. Fuck that Syrian guy. Like, so below her station and all this other stuff. And then it kind of starts getting heated a little bit by saying, like, why'd you even offer Ashur a meal? Gabinius with the revelation, I told him a false truth. So that way, if we learn that Crassus has heard this false truth, then we know that Asher is loyal. But if Crassus never finds out and we never hear anything about this false truth, then maybe Asher is more useful than we would have thought to bridge between Pompey and Crassus. So, I mean, Gabinius is smart. That's been in stuff before. A nice little trick, nice little plot. But I think it still works perfectly because Asher, he just got some information confided in him, but he also has hopes to go and rise to the Senate. So he's got to play it smart. He can't just be a loyal dog to Crassus.
I was so interested. So that was one of the things that I went back to listen to this scene specifically because I couldn't tell if he meant that he doesn't actually plan on doing that, like putting forth the law to like allow Pompey the authority to go after the Cilician pirates. I almost said Sicilian. Apologies. And then I watched it again, and the second time I watched it, I felt like it wasn't that he didn't mean to do that. It was that he just kind of wanted to see what Ashur would do about it. And so I think I came away more confused almost the second time. And I think part of that is that Gabinius was a real person. The show does a really good job of that. And like his one thing, there is the Lex Gabinia, which allows Pompey the authority to go after the Cilician pirates as consul. And so like that happens in real life. And I just don't know where this show is going to go with that, like that piece of actual history and how they'll twist it to make a story. Because it would be kind of funny if Ashur talks to Crassus about it and Crassus is so interested in it and Gabinius didn't really mean it, but then it gets enough momentum that it's like, okay, like I guess we'll do it. And that becomes like his like actually crowning piece of legislation in the Senate. And it's almost like ass backwards, but like Ashur kind of gets him like a level of respect in that way. Would be kind of funny for that to happen. But yeah, I also kind of thought it was interesting that Gabinius is of a mind that if Ashur doesn't tell Crassus about this, then he can be more useful in brokering peace between Crassus and Pompey. But it feels like that would be evidence of him being less involved in Crassus's affairs and not really having Crassus's ear if he's not telling him. So we'll just have to see how that all plays out. That's one of the background things I'm the most interested in is the Pompey Crassus kind of rivalry that's happening in the background of this and creating this really tense political climate. So I'm just looking forward for all that stuff coming more and more to light.
Yeah, I guess Gabinius means that Ashur may be so loyal to Crassus that he will basically won't want a reconciliation between the two. He'll want Crassus maybe to rise above, but maybe if Ashur isn't as loyal, then he will kind of whisper in Crassus's ear, try to bring him down a little bit and maybe be more equal playing field. But again, I'm not sure. And everything with the plaguing of the waters, too, like I didn't know too much about that. I'm happy you were there to kind of explain the whole false truth a little bit more too. But that would be so funny if it just kind of like turns out to be true and like it was a little rumor, a little lie, but all of a sudden it's like the momentum you're talking about.
Yeah, right. Like he thought up this scheme, this like random thing, like, all right, tell him this. And then once people start to hear it, they're like, oh, that's a great idea. Like we should totally do this. And they're like, dude, good job, Gabinius. And he's like, yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, thanks.
I
appreciate that.
I did.
Master strategizer over here.
Seriously, genius. I didn't clock too much of it. I just noticed that I think Cossutia brings up Gabinius's brother, and Gabinius didn't exactly take that to the conversation well. And that's when she kind of like, he's like, this conversation's done, and he's just walking away. And then Gabinius finally snaps and it's like, we're done with this conversation. Hear no more of it. So I don't really know what's going to happen with his brother, but it seems at least like some point of, conflict.
Yeah, I think I could be totally misreading this, but in Roman history, for the most part of the Republic, senators, it was, I don't think necessarily illegal to be engaged in business itself, but it was pretty much frowned upon to have any type of business ventures when you were in the Senate, because it would, they looked down on the merchant class because it was like, oh, well, all you care about is money. But us senators, we have the high virtue of we care about the Republic and, and Mother Rome and all of this stuff. But they imply here that Gabinius is a banker, which also in a way is like you could kind of like the lowest of the low of like the financial institution or kind of any type of financial activity you could get into, because you're really just lending money and kind of making interest off of people versus you're not really creating anything. And that might be almost my own political personal bias seeping into that. But I just remember reading like books on Roman history, and like one of the kind of keynotes almost in the breakdown of the Republic is kind of that years and decades and almost hundreds of years before it actually fell was this kind of breakdown of that traditional mindset of like, you're a senator, your job is political, like you shouldn't be involved in business dealings because it's like kind of unethical and it's also like should be beneath you. But here we have a senator who is literally a banker. And I think that she kind of looks down on the fact that he is a banker. And it seems like his brother kind of convinced him to go into this. But his shot back is basically like, that nice dress you got on, them jewels you're wearing, that stuff you're flaunting in the market. Like, how do you think that came to be?
Yeah.
Because I'm a banker, baby. So,
Yeah.
you know, you only have so far to actually get to in this argument, because eventually we get to this point and it's like, you don't really have much to say after that.
She likes the fineries, I think is the way he said it. And we also learn in another conversation from Opiter that she also likes maybe a little risque stuff. So, you know, I'm sure she needs a coin for that too.
There's so many layers. There's going to be some layers to Cossutia that I'm interested in peeling back for sure. She also has one other interesting line that she just kind of claims, and I think we're kind of aware of this. This is the first time I think it's explicitly stated that literally the only reason that the House of Ashur gets a sniff of respect from anyone is because of Chorus. Yeah. And that also is a good setup for like the kind of Doctore line we'll talk about of obviously the House of Opiter also kind of is of singular mind with that. And so we're thinking, like you said, like, oh man, like, is he really going to leave the House of Ashur and all this stuff? So I just thought that all that was kind of well done. And the last thing I will say is that the messenger arrives for Gabinius and Cossutia kind of receives it instead in that kind of one individual scene and decides to deal with it herself. And then she kind of burns the message. What do you think the message was? Because we're kind of interpreting that she dealt with it in the way of trying to kill Chorus.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of what they want you to believe, the A to B, because that's the next time we see her is the confirmation of that. But like, I'm trying to just think of what the message might have been that would want her to like make that bold of a play.
The only thing that I was coming up with was that it was somebody giving the House of Ashur a shot at whether going to the games, going to some event, going for another meal again. And she's like, I'm not letting this happen. I'm not letting this Ashur guy come into my life and elevate even more than he is. So maybe she burned the note and was like, I'm just going to nip this in the bud, meaning I'm not going to let Ashur succeed because I'm going to kill what makes him succeed, which is Chorus and Doctore. And she obviously saw Doctore in the market earlier, so she kind of knew that of his whereabouts, I should say.
I like it. Yeah. That was way better than anything I would have said if our roles were reversed. So I appreciate it.
I love this scene. It was a lot, but I think that's what is so intelligent about this show is every sentence that these high rankings individuals are saying is information of moving the plot. Like Cossutia will say a line and move it a little left, and then Gabinius is like, no, don't worry, and moves it back a little bit right. And every sentence is so important, so much information. And like the notes, it's easily, it takes me like the longest to watch these type of episodes because my note taking takes so long. But at the same time, I absolutely love it because they're so smart and quick and witty in their conversation. It's just, they can process these difficult sentences way quicker than I can. So I love it.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that at some point a little bit later too. That was something I saw on the Reddit a lot. Was not a lot. That's aggressive to say, but people kind of complaining about the flowery language, thinking it's like more over the top this season than previously. I think it's specifically also around the conversation we're going to get into very shortly of between, we're just going to call him Operator and Doctore. And people were like, I don't know what the heck they were talking about that whole time. But for me, I sometimes I'm okay with being a little lost because it's like they're just getting after it in this way. And it's like I can either rewatch it to like kind of really break down the meaning of something, or I think usually at the end of conversations, like the kind of point of things become clear. So I personally love the dialogue so much. I have no issues with it whatsoever.
I don't either. I love it. It makes me feel like I'm in that time period, even though they probably didn't fully speak like this in that time period.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get what people are saying. It does feel like sometimes this season the language is a little bit more flowery than it used to be. Like the sentences, there's like a comma and then another part of flowery language. But I mean, I like it when they say like split lips and spill truth instead of speak. Like that just sounds so much cooler.
Yeah. And then even time we'll get characters sometimes. I almost called her Creticus. I have no idea where that came from. Cossutia says to Gabinius, like, you speak in riddles, baby. Like, just give it to me plain. And then he starts talking like a little differently. And it's like, yeah, you know, sometimes when even the characters in the universe are like, all right, you're losing me a little bit here. Just stop riddling around and just give it to me straight. Yeah. So I appreciate those parts as well. Okay. Let's move now into our second bucket, which is going to be the man himself, Doctore. And this first conversation we're going to have is a little bit of a homecoming in a way. This is familiar territory, although it looks different. Familiar territory here because we are in the pits. So we revisit the pits here with Doctore. We kind of run into one of Doctore's old acquaintances, Fides. And then this is the start of the Operator and Doctore kind of situation that goes on, but they have a little bit of a conversation about grain. Doctore feeds him what we find out later is the false line about Anubis, but another callback to the original series there as well. So first question I'm going to lob over to you is, how did you feel about the pits? They're much more well lit than we previously have experienced.
Yeah. I was gonna say they don't seem as far deep down into the pits as they used to be. But I mean, still as violent as ever. Fucking lady in the crowd just bashes the wine cask over the dude's head and then just takes one right in the face. I was like, you don't need to get involved, lady. But it was a lot of fun to just remember exactly what happened down here and how brutal it is. And honestly, I thought the task that course was sent on was to fight in the pits and win money. That's what I thought he was sent to do, because the House of Ashur was like struggling so much. So I was like, all right, like we're gonna just see Course just destroy everybody. It's gonna be great. We also get to see that at the end of the episode, but I definitely love where it ended up. And we see Chorus is not only a beast in the arena, we know that, but he's so smart and intelligent. All Asher said was go gain Operator's, trust or ear. And Chorus came up with everything about himself, the fake line about Anubis, the flirting, I guess, if you want to call it that, the good conversation, the leading, maybe I will come work for you, which we get in a little bit. But I love Doctore more and more as the show goes on. And Graham McTavish is phenomenal. I love him.
Yeah, he definitely had the best episode. Just an unbelievable Doctore episode. I see some people's complaints about the pitch just feel like a little more sanitized in a way, but I just love using them as this kind of almost background for this maneuvering that's happening. So I just enjoyed it to be kind of back here. I also love, and I don't remember off the top of my head if it's Operator. Actually, it is, because when Operator and Doctore kind of initiate this discussion here, and Operator's kind of saying, they kind of have a little bit of this verbal back and forth where Doctore's kind of takes a little bit of a shot of like, oh man, you guys have been losing a lot, And Operator's like, yeah, I got to be here, kind of replenish the Ludus. And they talk a little bit, I think, about like the quality of the fighters and such from here. And then we get the Oenomaus name drop because he's saying, you know what I mean? He came from this place. They also talk about Spartacus having fought in the pits and things like that. And for me, I'm a big fan of when they bring those things up. But basically, they kind of establish, all right, let's take this somewhere a little bit more conducive to conversation, for men of our stature. So they head back to the villa, let's say, at the house of Apater. And man, this is a straight up bro down right here. This is just a couple of bros. We're drinking, we're whining, we're wrestling, we're gossiping, and we get into some blowing and banging. I mean, this had everything. This had every ing thing you could think about at a bro down, and lots of meandering conversation of beating around the bush of a point and like kind of waiting for the other one to kind of maybe like make the point for you to like see if they're actually picking up what you're putting down. So a lot of maneuvering via conversation here, but I really think that this scene is only going to get better and better as we kind of look back onto it.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way that it's just how they speak, and the status thing is they can't just say things. They have to tiptoe around it, because if you come out and say it, that could be taken as disrespectful or not even, honorable. So it's not like Opter can straight up say, hey, leave Asher and come work for me. But he says it in every other possible way. He's like, hey, why are you even with Asher? He makes you take down, the dead bodies from the crosses. And Doctor is like, oh, like, did Proculus tell you that, and all this other stuff. And then they start talking about, well, if you were for me in my house, I would have position in the games, and I could, you would be so successful if you worked for me. But he's not actually saying it. And I hate it and love it at the same time, because it is frustrating that they can't just come out and say it, but I love their ability to dance around it. And when the wrestlers were there, I was like, all right, cool little entertainment, and then a little clap of the hands. And like, same with Chorus. I was like, whoa, wasn't expecting that. And Chorus is like, what is going on right now? Like, you like watching this? And Operator is like, dude, all the elites love it. Like, and
everyone likes this, brother.
And another callback to season 2. The former head of your house knew this. There was actually like the bang pad pretty much for a little bit in season 2 there.
1,000,000%.
They even bring up Cossutia too. It was like, and Cossutia even takes part in these temptations, or I don't even know what you would call it. They have better language.
Of course. They always do. But yeah, I'm a lot of things I'm thinking a lot of things about this, but one of them, off of what you just said, I would be so interested if Doctore kind of reports to Asher on this conversation, and Asher angles the House of Ashur into kind of that, let's say, almost a void potentially left by the House of Batiatus. It seems like Operator has kind of filled that void in this like elite's playground of kind of taboo things, specifically around probably like the banging of slaves. But if Asher can kind of angle his house into that way, in, like you said, the same way that Batiatus did that. Batiatus and Lucretia were basically pimping out their house to like gain favor with everyone in the area, and it worked. It friggin' worked for sure. I mean, some people died along the way, but it worked for Batiatus and Lucretia, So if there's a lesson that Asher can learn from that, I would be definitely an interesting way for the story to go. And we know from some of the previews that Caesar's going to come along, and we know that Caesar, while it's a different actor, he's going to have the same personality. So I think he could also be an engine in that, of just like debauchery constantly going on within the House of Ashur. So that would be quite an interesting ripple effect of this conversation. But yeah, I loved how much Avatar was just clearly flirting with Doctore too, when he just like kind of like touches his arm too, and he's like, you exhibit, like, you're so smart, dude, like, you're crazy smart. And then he was like, I would never disrespect you like Asher disrespects you. Like, it's just so funny the way that he goes about the conversation. And the whole time I was just thinking, like, are they gonna kiss? Like, it would be so crazy if they kissed right now, and that would have really made me question what Doctore was up to. But I think that if it came down to it, like, he might have done it for the boys, like for the squad, for the Ludus.
Oh yeah,
I think he totally would bang Operator for the Ludus, because I love the end of this when they kind of they're beating around all of this bush, and Operator's saying in 18,000 words, like, I want you to work for me. Operator throws his own Doctore under the bus. because Chorus is again bringing up this concept that like you're in the games, but you're losing. And Operator's like, well, it's my Doctore's fault, but I'm in the games, baby. Like if I could just get a new Doctore, we could be killing
Yeah.
it. And the way that Doctore, our Doctore, angles the conversation in the way that gives Operator a reason to give the House of Ashur a foothold is so, I just love the way he did it. He's basically saying like, hey man, those are my men. Like they're from the House of Ashur, but they're my men. So when they do well on the sands, it increases my own reputation, and it would really look good for whatever house I'm the Doctore of in the future. And I think that gave Operator something to think about.
Definitely.
For sure. I mean, he dismissed the bank slaves right after that. They were done with that, and then I think he went to some contemplation himself.
Yeah, yeah, and I loved the seduction from Operator, who thinks he's really like breaking down Doctore's shell, but Doctore still, implementing his plan the whole time. And how can you possibly phrase "put my house in the games" and that'll make you look better? Like that doesn't make any sense, right? But the way Doctore made it make sense was very logical. It's like, hey, my men, everybody's gonna see how good they are, and then as soon as you get me as your Doctore, then you're gonna look like a genius too. And definitely makes sense. And I loved the final lines they had. It was, again, you can't say it right out, but you can speak in riddles almost. And Doctor is saying you can't jump off a cliff hoping to grow wings, meaning this is too much of like a chance. Oh, this is hopeful. It's never going to happen. Of course, the conversation goes on is how could a hawk ever know if he could fly? How high could this hawk soar higher than the ludus? And so Doctor is like, okay.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the kicker is Operator's like, all right, if I do this all for you, what are you gonna do for me? And Chorus is like, well, maybe we could have a little bit more wine and talk a little bit in the future. Just showing a little shoulder. Chorus
Yeah.
is he knows what he's doing. He's flirting back a little bit too.
Yes, he does layers, baby. Chorus is turning out to be a little bit of an onion here, and I'm quite appreciative of it because after this conversation, if we feel comfortable moving off of the convo into this walk home, or I also kind of dubbed this in our combined notes here of just turning back the clock in a way, is just we have the side of Doctor that we would expect the most. This is the most outward version of Doctore, the most recognizable version of Doctore, is just getting down to business. I mean, perfectly summed up by he's cornered by some vagrants, in the dark, in the streets of Capua, and it's just blood or coin, straight up, right to business. They unsheath the daggers, and then, all right, blood then, baby. And then they just get after it. I love that line. It's so simple, but it was so good. I fucking love it so much.
It was so hard,
and
man. It was so good.
he just gets after it. Some people had some complaints about the choreography in this scene, and I'm going to look at it with the rose-colored glasses of he's just like an older guy. He still got it. I think mentally, for sure, he still got it. They just showed us he still got it mentally, but he's just a little bit older now. So like he can still, fuck people up for sure, because he was fucking people up, but he's just a little bit slower. You're that much slower. You get caught with a couple daggers. Things look a little bit more wooden. You're not as flexible and all of those things. That's the way I took it. But some people did have an issue with the choreography in this scene.
I mean, I definitely noticed how the shots were like cut, and it was beautifully done though. Tackle through a fence. As soon as you go through the fence, it cuts to like the next shot of that fight and everything like that. So it was like short little stints, which I don't really have a problem with. And I kind of did notice, the choreography. Some of the knife thrust seemed a little slow, not from maybe from Doctore, but more from the thugs. But in my mind, it was these aren't trained gladiators. These are just straight up thugs that don't know how to fight. So they're not going to look good while they're throwing down. Hence why Chorus was able to take out, what was it, five of them, six of them, however many it was. So I kind of see what they were saying. But again, that was only within this fight. It's not any of the other like training in the Ludus or like Arena, like that all looks great too. So I think it was done on purpose, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think I agree. I noticed it a little bit. I remember thinking a little bit while I was watching, but I don't think it really impacted my enjoyment too
No.
much. I trust this show so much on the fight choreography. So I think inclined to believe that there was maybe like an explainable purpose for it to look that way. And then also B, I'm willing to give him a pass sometimes if it doesn't look fantastic. Because I just, they've done nothing over the years but show us that they know how to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if that one wasn't up to your standards, I'm sure the majority of fights in this show are going to be up to our standards and are going to be freaking awesome. Okay, the last part of here, we get the reveal that it was his old buddy, his old acquaintance, Fighties, that we met at the pits, who was kind of angling for some money and position. He obviously was desperate in that way. But I think we'll learn a little bit later. And actually, we can just probably talk about it a little bit now, that it seemed like he was also already on this line at the pits. Like he was after Doctore to kill him. I wonder if he was trying to poison him at the pits a little bit. But Doctore was like, "No, bro, business. Get out of here. Like, you're a little rat. Get out of here," which that might have saved his life. And that was just interesting. And the part that you say about the gladiators too, like they're not gladiators, so they're not fighters. I was trying to like look at the bodies to see if it was one of the guys they showed us from the pits, because I was thinking, like, was it Opiter that like sent these guys after him for some like weird scheme way? Because we know that Opiter was like sent his guys to be like, "Hey, buy whoever wins the stuff, like no more than 3 denarii." And then I was like trying to think like, oh my God, did he buy one of the guys from the pit? Ridiculous now that I think about it. We had the whole conversation about how bad he wants Doctore to be his Doctore. So that was just me being a little stupid, but that's okay because we're allowed to be a little stupid.
I like it.
All right. So we're going to move now into our third and final bucket. So this is Ashur and the villa itself, all of the happenings within the villa, the conversations there, everything that happens down at the Ludus, and then we'll tie everything with a bow in the kind of final conversation that happens between Ashur and Doctore, which is where we'll really get into that conversation about Cossutia and that reveal and kind of what's going to happen moving forward in these episodes. So the first kind of scene or scenes, rather groups of things we'll talk about, is kind of this temporary Doctore moment at the start, this kind of first part of the training. So we kind of have the boys are just still pissed again about this kind of honor that the house lacks at this point. They're kind of blaming Ashur. We get a Gannicus and a Crixus shout out. So shout out. We also have Doctore handing the whip to Kelidus here because we know from earlier in this episode, earlier in our conversation, that he's going out onto this mission that Ashur gave him. We have Arato and Tarkhan get into a fight, but I think the real big part of this is that we have the Ashur versus Achillea part 1 is kind of what happens, I think, in this little semi-smaller bucket, this conversation here. So that's a lot, but I think we just open it up.
Yeah, first thought, I can't wait to watch Arato die whenever he does, unless he has like the best character arc of all time. It's just like more Achillea hate. Like, I'm not going to work the palace next to a woman. And Creticus is like, dude, just shut up. Like, just train.
Creticus, you did it. Cool. We both did it.
Oh, it's Kelidus. Damn it. Why did I have that? I have it.
I mean, listen, the way that Creticus went out, I think, is seared into our brains at this point. Like, my body knows that happened to him. So his name just ends up on the tip of my tongue.
It's so annoying that he's dead, but yeah, that's the name that keeps coming to mind. So it's never going to come back into play. Kelidus, though. Kelidus is speaking truth and wisdom. Just focus on your training, like rise to glory. And of course, that was perfect timing because Doctore comes out and hands over the whip, which Kelidus, you can tell the honor that he had just to be offered this. And it does kind of get out of hand, like you're saying. Tarkhan and Arato kind of get into it, and Kelidus is like telling him to stop. He's whipping, but they're not stopping. He finally needs to like say, "Yo, do you know who I am? you better fucking listen to me, okay? Like, he starts ripping off all these names, and I'm like, dude, this is just, I know I don't know these people really. They could be historical figures, and that would be cool. But either way, it's just past glory in the arena. I would love to get a little flashback. I doubt we will, but like, you can make a prequel show about just like Calidus when he was in his prime, I guess you could say. So I love him. I cannot wait to see where he goes, but I'm just expecting heartbreak between, him and his son. Somebody's going to die. It feels like, unfortunately. I don't want them to, because clearly the show's trying to make us like them. And then in terms of Asher and Halara, he's pissed that she even went down into the Ludus to, confront Achillea. She's trying to tell Asher there's like this shadow in her eye. There's something wrong with her, something holding her back. And Asher's like, how do you even know this? And starts freaking out at her. And Messi is kind of in there too, trying to say a word. And Asher's just like, dude, shut up to her. And then Halara kind of gives her opinion, which is maybe Achillea is too much of a burden. Maybe you should just forget about her. And Asher is like, who the fuck are you to give me counsel? And this is kind of what we were talking about episode 1 and 2. It's like Halara was in that position to basically be the Lucretia, to kind of give him counsel, just talk to, bounce back and forth. But in this moment, Asher's so pissed that he is using that divide between them, just throw it in their face. And immediately he kind of takes like a deep breath and is like almost calming down. I was like, oh, I spoke out of turn. But then he hears the chaos going in the middle of the Ludus, so he doesn't really have a chance to apologize in this moment. But you can tell that even though Halara worked for the house, Asher still has this fondness for Halara and seems to actually care about her. We'll kind of get that more later on, but
Yeah, I loved Calidus in this episode. It was so interesting that we get, like you mentioned, too, all of the people he's defeated. He says, too, a champion of this very house. So he took down a champion of the House of Batiatus, which is awesome. Yeah. So he should have their respect. I think the way he acts and also the way that we know he fights, because we know he came in second in that Tournament of Power that happened in episode 1. So they should know, too, that he's a beast in any way. But I like that they just threw this out there of him being like all of these things that he's done. And it's like, yes, like I'm the man. But Asher kind of seizing upon that opportunity. So he kind of hears this chaos going on with Arado and Tarkon. And I love the line of like, what shit spews to open mouth now? But he walks out and he's like, yeah, dude, look at this. What an example of setting mind to purpose. And like, that's what you can get. But he also throws a random shot at Calidus where he's like, and then, you too can go like have conversations one day about faded glory.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, bro, was the faded glory necessary? Like, they even have the shot of Calidus's face, and he's like, he definitely feels some type of way about it. And one thing I'm going to ask you here is, do you think Calidus is like holding himself back so that he can like stay alongside Tarkon? Because why is he not like the main guy of the Ludus? Like, it feels like he should be the guy who would be their champion in a way. Like, I feel like he would have defeated the brothers Ferrex 100%.
Yeah, I mean, the way he talks to Tarkon is like, yeah, you're too eager. You have to be smart. You have to be patient. It seems like obviously he survived in the arena, so he knows what he's talking about. And I think you or Luke brought it up last coverage where he made it to the end, and somebody said maybe he did throw on purpose just to be there for his son, to be able to teach his son, make sure he has guidance and stuff like that. So I think you could be onto something where he could be holding back. And I wonder if this remark from Asher will kind of hit him in his pride to the point where he does kind of rebel in a way. I don't know how he would, because he is, still a slave. He's not like Doctore, who is a free man. So I don't know exactly what he would do. But yeah, that Asher line, I was so upset because like I was like, yeah, praise my boy, hype my boy up, show everybody else that Calidus is the man. And then he backhands him with the faded glory line, and I think it was almost maybe jealousy from Asher's standpoint, because he had faded glory in the arena as well, and obviously, you can say almost disgrace. He was left with quote unquote disgrace with his injury and everything like that, and unable to like really get back and fight again. So I think there's a little bit of maybe even too Asher and Kelidus have like a history together somehow of fighting. I'm not exactly sure if that timeline even matches up, but it seems that Asher is envious or jealous of Calidus slightly in some way, just from that remark.
I think what you just mentioned too might give us two avenues for Kellers to get back into the arena. One being maybe he himself gets even more motivated when Asher's kind of talking like this faded glory, like acting like everything's in the past, and where he might be thinking like, I still got some juice, man. Like he's naturally the one that Chorus thinks of as his backup Doctore. He seems to be the oldest guy. He's been in the arena. He's won all of those things, but maybe that's a turning point for him of like, all right, man, get me back on those sands. Like I'll show you faded glory. But then the other avenue could be Asher being like, if it gets to a point where they all kind of respect Kelidus, maybe even more than him, and Asher's like, all right, fucking throw that guy into the arena. Like, A, what he's really made of, and then B, you know what I mean? Hopefully he dies. So we can just get him out of the Ludus at this point, because he seems petty enough to think that way. That's very short-term emotional versus like, oh, Kelidus, if he's actually good, he could win us some goddamn money. You know, that old money and opportunity, what Asher is always obsessed with. But we will see. I think that they're setting us up for some interesting stuff with Kelidus himself. Okay. I think one thing we should really get into is this Asher versus Achilles stuff. So we talked about it a little bit last night when we were hanging out, of love to see Asher donning the gear and like onto the sands. But he pretty much beats the crap out of her in two separate occasions here. The first time is when he first introduces this question of why do you fail? So he's taking the information that Halara gave him, like you mentioned, that there's just something mentally going on with her that like I think she says like a shadow of a specter almost. There's something haunting her that's holding her back mentally. So Asher kind of, I think, very successfully and smartly goes through this line of why do you fail? You know, what is actually going on with you? And she kind of tries to answer like, you know, because I'm not as strong or whatever. And it's just like, nah, like that's not it. The first time where he was like, you know, I'll be back and I expect a much better fucking answer next time. They fight again. And again, he's just beating the crap out of her. I love it though, because again, this was just good action. Also, fantastic use of slow mo.
Oh yeah.
I think in these fights, just like really letting us feel the weight of some of those blows, or when he like kind of like trips her up and like takes her off her feet, and then she's just like floating in the air in the slow mo. I'm like, we're fucking back, baby. This is classic Spartacus right here. But the second time of the why do you fail, we get the real answer here. I mean, okay, we'll call it 75% of the answer, because her answer is because I stand unworthy, my duty forsaken. So she kind of gives us a little bit of a hint here that she thinks she failed in some way in whatever her duty might have been in the past. And then Asher, I think, kind of takes that answer as, all right, now we're fucking getting somewhere here. Like, I feel that we're kind of turning a corner in what's going on here.
Yeah, why go to therapy when you could just have somebody beat the shit out of you to really find the answer that you're looking for?
It's a lot cheaper, I would assume.
I loved this whole set of scenes here, even from the beginning, where Asher's like, "Hey, were you using the style of Marmillo when you cut Doctore?" And she's like, "No, I was using a sword and torch." And Asher's like, "Ah, akin to that of the what is it, Damocarius?
Yeah.
A style favored by Spartacus himself." And he's yelling it so all the other gladiators can hear too. He's hyping her up. And then of course she has the line of like, "Am I to be punished if I draw blood?" I was like, all right, we're reaching a little bit high here. And Ash is like, such a feat would be met with reward here. So I liked that. We see, like you said, she gets beat but doesn't say the response. So Asher's like, I love this line. I don't know why. He's like, work the palace and hope reflection leads to more intelligent response or something like that. And it was just like, just go work the wood, man. And then he comes out like pumped, ready to go. He's like, all right, round 2, let's get it. And I think that Achilea might have been more open to revealing the reason why she fails if all the other gladiators weren't around. Maybe she would have said it a little bit earlier, not right away, because Ashur still needed to get it out of her. But like she says, "Why do you fail?" And she stands up and looks at all the other gladiators who are just staring at her, and she's like, "I don't want to be more vulnerable. I can't let them see this." So that's why she tries to go fight again. So I mean, Ashur, good guy Ashur out of nowhere, when all of a sudden he just gets on a knee, offers a hand, and is like, hey, your past does not define your future. Like, you are worthy in the arena, and got really like sentimental. And I didn't know Ashur really had this in him. Maybe it's just the scheming of him and that smart tongue that we know he has. But I was surprised that he was showing this softness. But I think it worked, obviously, because we see Achilea in her cell later, and she's reiterating that, my past does not define who I am. And she even, scribbles out I'm not sure if it's her god or her religion, the glyphs in her cell, but, at the end, she scratches it out. And that's almost the sign of her, breaking that barrier and moving on and getting that fresh start. It's very similar to what Spartacus felt like he had.
Yeah, and Ashur obviously has some ulterior motives here, but he is, in a way, he's totally helping her out in kind of helping her to move past what this kind of block is for her. Because really, at the end of the day, her choices are basically to get killed in the Ludus eventually, or it is to really seize this kind of opportunity. It's unfortunate that those are really the only choices that she has, but one is a lot better than the other one. So it's nice in a way to see her maybe turning this corner more towards seizing the opportunity itself. And I do think it's interesting that we get a little bit of a kind of like a rain motif in a way too. Like it starts to rain kind of at the end of this. And I know obviously anytime it rains in Spartacus, we think of the bringer of rain. I don't know how much they were thinking that in a way, because we do get the Democharis, the two-sword style thing to Spartacus, but also, this washing away of the past. And she just has to move past that into kind of seizing opportunity within the present and potentially into the future. So I think this stuff, we're only really 3 episodes in. I think it has moved maybe slow in a way, only because we haven't really gotten into the arena that much. But I think that it'll all be worth it in the future. I think a lot of the seeds that were planted throughout this episode, outside of even just this Achilea Ashur stuff, are going to bloom into more interesting and more developed storylines as we move forward. So I feel like we're in a good spot with this for sure. I definitely think that she's going to start kicking some ass soon, which I, for one, will welcome with open arms, because I think it's badass. One interesting part, though, is that when he calls out the two-sword style, the Democharis stuff, that's how Calidus fights. Like, how has this guy not been the poster child of the house? Like, they must just think he's too old.
Yeah.
That just has to be what it is. Or unless he is just like kind of angles himself like kind of slightly out of the opportunities so that he's still around in the Ludus to kind of give all of this teaching to Tarchon himself. But it's just like, brother, he's right there. He wins. He wins, and he uses two swords.
Talking about,
why don't we give him a shot?
Talking about all these Spartacus parallels with Achilea, like where was this with Calidus? Like, where's
this guy, and he doesn't have a rebellious bone in his body. No. He will die for the Ludus, man. He's all about it. It's just like so funny that it's just like right there in front of Ashur. But that is, could be just another thing in the kind of this story almost they're trying to tell us, that Ashur he's not really good at this. Nah. He's really not good at being a dominus in any way. No one respects him. That's also his story in the original series. No one respects him. It doesn't change in this alternate universe just because he didn't die on Mount Vesuvius and he happened to kill Spartacus from behind, you know? So he's still struggling with that. And we're seeing all the ripple effects of that. You know, the gladiators don't respect him. None of the Romans respect him at all. That's such a major theme. And he's just going to have to figure that out. And he's not doing the greatest job of it. But I think that, you know, it's going to fester to the point where it either blows up or gets to a point where he has to grow himself. So we'll see. But he makes another, I would say, misstep along those lines with what ends up being not necessarily the last scene here, but the scene with Achilea getting the mark itself from him. So he just decides, you know, you made it. Like, you're good enough. I'm satisfied with the training and the answer too that you gave me in the why do you fail. So he summons her to the sands at night for the ceremony, for the ritual itself. And even Tarchon, I love this, that Tarchon steps up and was like, she didn't beat the bridge. She did not best the bridge like all of us here. So, like, why does she deserve the mark?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we know from the original that Ashur never did that either. Yeah. You know, Ashur got the mark in a backhanded way, and people didn't respect that. And he obviously didn't learn at all from that, because he's just putting an even bigger target on her back now, because they didn't respect her at all, no matter what. And now she, in their eyes, unjustly gains the mark of brotherhood.
Yeah.
And then they don't respect Ashur at all. And he gives her unjustly the mark of brotherhood. Yeah. So that's even less reason for them to respect him as the dominance of the house, because he doesn't clearly respect the rituals that they put a lot of stock in as gladiators of the house. And so it's just a mess. I mean, this seems like a major misstep for sure from Ashur, but that's the point. Yeah. It's supposed to be that way. He hasn't learned these lessons. He still is this old Ashur that is just struggling in this role of dominance, and he keeps stepping on rakes constantly. And I mean, it's entertaining because it's going to create even more issues in the future, and we'll just see how it goes down. But I did not expect Achilea to get the mark this early.
Yeah. I was honestly a little bit upset because I was like, she didn't do anything to prove herself, like Tarchon was saying. Even, you know, it wasn't the bridge, but Ashur had to go do something. He had to go kill, you know, his target that, what was it, Batiatus made him go get. And that was at least something to get the mark. But to go off of that, none of the other gladiators respected Ashur. You know, Ashur's like, dude, I have the mark of the brotherhood. Why do you guys treat me like shit? And all the other gladiators are like, yeah, you might have the mark, but you didn't earn it. So definitely feels like that's going to happen to Achilea still. Like, and like you said, Ashur's gladiators has like no morale for him or the house right now. And Ashur even had a line to Achilea at the end when she, you know, reveals the truth about why she fails. He says, resume training and seize fate as champion of this fucking house. And I'm sure everybody around him was like, yeah, what the fuck? What about like us right now? Like, why even every bit of attention towards Achilea? So I'm waiting for that kind of, you know, fallout to happen. But hey, man, winning changes everything. Everybody's happy as soon as you start winning. So maybe if the House of Ashur starts getting some dubs in the arena, which seems like Chorus was able to secure position, we'll see, then maybe the morale just changes instantly and the coin makes everybody happy.
Yes, it does. And maybe Ashur can start to earn, in a way, a little bit of respect, although we might, as we kind of talked about, maybe it goes to Chorus instead of Ashur himself. But yeah, man, I mean, Ashur just, another thing too is that when we talked about that, because you brought it up with Hilara kind of talking back to him, even Messia, his, like, we'll say not right hand but left hand in a way, they talk back to him because I think he's just not good at running a household either. But he has no experience with this stuff. Like Batiatus, the gladiators talked shit on Batiatus, but they had respect for him because his family name, because of the fact that he had just had experience, I think, running a household and knowing what it meant to separate. And this is like this is fucked up to like congratulate him in a way on this, but like knowing how to separate like his personal relationships with them as individuals and the fact that there are slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ashur just struggles with that. I think there's something potentially unconscious with him, and that he was a slave himself. So does he have some maybe like inability in a way to like really come down hard on, I think specifically the house slaves? You know, it seems like he flip flops real hard on Hilara. Of he gives her a really long leash to talk to him, but then in the moments when he doesn't like it, then he's like, "Well, who are you to say that to me?" And because he even asks her after the second fight with Achilea, I think it is, and whatever, he's kind of like struggling, whatever it might be, and she answers him like about like how he looked out there, and it's like, you know, a champion or whatever, and he was like, I will not have answer from slave, I'll have answer from Hilara. And it's like, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You know, and it feels like he's trying to do that with like her, and like no wonder why Messia too kind of will speak, because he just doesn't have that kind of consistent, let's say, hand on the yoke, to almost use a little bit of the metaphor that Messia herself uses here. And I think some people in the Reddit that I've read have been like really upset with like the constant disrespect that Ashur gets from all angles, but it's supposed to be that way. He has done nothing to actually earn people's respect. In everyone's eyes, he's been gifted the ludus by Crassus. You know, he killed Spartacus from behind. That doesn't really garner a lot of respect from the gladiators themselves. Why would his own slaves respect him when the house one specifically kind of get to oscillate between we're friends and then we're not? You know, and the gladiators know his reputation a little bit. The Romans, he used to be a slave and he's foreign. It's like, we'll never respect you. So he's got to figure it out. He's got to figure it out quick. But I think that is kind of the story. That's why we're watching the show.
Going back to Gabinius's line, episode 2, while they're having their meal, Gabinius says, "You are straddling a line that is impossible to straddle," you know? And it's everything that you just said. He's still, you know, he was elevated from a slave. So like he still does have some type of looks at slaves with softer than a head of a other house was, who never was. But at the same time, he doesn't get respect from anybody in the house, let alone outside of the house. So he's trying to move forward with his status without actually having solid ground beneath him already, and he's just pushing forward. So at one point it's either going to snap or something's going to click, and he's just going to succeed. I don't really know, but yeah, everything with Hilara here, it just kind of shows how back and forth he is and how much he doesn't have it together, snapping at her one moment but realizing I love you and you're special to me in another. Which he doesn't say I love you, but there's obviously this fondness between them. And we didn't talk about it earlier, but Messia and Hilara have a scene while they're looking over Ashur training Achilea, and Messia basically just confesses her love for Hilara, which I was like, so not the right time or place, but whatever. Maybe there's never a good time or place, so whatever, go for it. But she was like, "Oh, like Ashur shouldn't have talked to you like that, Hilara." And in Hilara's mind, she's like, "No, he had every right to talk to me like that. He is the head of the house. I am just, you know, a maid, a slave." So you can see that she just adores Ashur, and Ashur can do no wrong for Hilara. Meanwhile, Messia is in this weird, messy situation, as you called it last night when we talked about it. She tries to get in on the lovemaking, but then Hilara is the one that sends her to go get wined and wait until she's summoned. So would she have said that if Messia? I was trying to figure out if she didn't want to share Ashur, Hilara wanted Ashur all to herself, or if Messia's revelation earlier about her love for Hilara is now messing with Hilara, and she doesn't really want that in the room anymore because it's going to complicate things. So I was going back and forth between the two, but Messia was definitely crying in the corner, felt like.
Yeah, I feel like everything with Hilara is pure ambition. So I'm of a mind that she thinks that anything around that could risk her position next to Ashur.
Okay. So it's less love.
So she's not into it. Yeah, from that angle at all.
I like that too.
I would say, honestly, shout out to Messia, because A, it's difficult to admit feelings like that for anyone. So good on her for trying. And B, I think the opportunity was kind of there. Like Asher just yelled at Hilara, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, he shouldn't talk to you like that. By the way, I fucking love you." It's like, honestly, if you're gonna shoot a Hail Mary, you might as well do it in somewhat favorable conditions like that. So, respect to the girl. We'll see what her storyline comes out to be, because it is not looking good
So
for our girl Messi.
So with Hilara, when Asher's like, "Let me go take a bath, wash off the day's labors," and she's like, "No, I would have you as you are." You think that's just her pleasing Asher in any way, or is there an actual like fondness, like "take me now," like kind of love there?
I think it's maybe a little of both, but I want to say it's more duty bound for her
Okay.
ambition, where she's like, "This is hot, and he's gonna like it, so I'm gonna get after it." But I also think that she cares about him in not only the strict sense of like her fate is tied to his, but also I think that she has a little bit of feelings for him as well. But I would almost argue I think he has more feelings for her than she has for him, like genuine romantic feelings.
Yeah, it seems like it. When you already said it, but he's like, "I would have answer from Hilara," and the way he looks at her and everything, it does seem like he cares about her, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's his big battle too, is like, I can do what I want, man. I'm the Dominus, so like I can really do what I want, but then also I can't really like marry this slave
Yeah,
girl. It's like, what do you do about those actual feelings that you have? You just keep it that way, because he can't like free her and then marry her, because that's such a ding on his own honor and respect, which is terrible to think about, but that's totally what it
yeah,
is. So, Viridia, as Luciatis has mentioned, is a much more equitable pairing, a much more suitable match for his ambitions within the world. So we'll see. This went from a love triangle, and we kind of hinted a little bit it might be a square, I guess, with Messia's inclusion last, because they kind of gave us a little bit of hints, but it's full blown now. You know what I mean? Asher has feelings for Hilara. Hilara has feelings for Asher, but is really ambitious. Messia has genuine feelings for Hilara. Asher's totally going to be into Viridia. Viridia is probably going to be into Asher, and it's going to be a
yeah.
mess. It's going to get bloody. It'll probably get horny before it gets bloody, which is fine
We
with
love it.
us. And we'll just have to see how that goes.
Yeah, it's a love three-sided pyramid almost with what you're saying, which is Asher up top
Your
and then
mind.
everybody down here. And it's a shame Luke's not on this episode because he was the one bringing up, Hilara is going to kill Viridia or hate Viridia because Viridia is going to take Asher away from her, Hilara. But now, after this episode, knowing that Asher cares for Hilara but can never really marry her, is he going to be upset? Say he goes to take Viridia's hand down later in the season. Like, is he actually going to be upset that he can't be with Hilara as well? Or is it going to be like Badiatus, where he still, is banging his slaves while he has his wife? And that's just kind of how it runs. But that seems too messy because it's not just banging at that point. Asher still has feelings for a slave while also having a wife. So it's like, I don't know how any of this is going to go down.
There's also the wild card of elite Romans that he might try to court
Yeah.
with the slaves in the future, which could add a little bit of interesting feelings in, a la like Lucretia with Ilithia trying to bang Crixus. And she felt some type of way about that. Like, is Asher going to be in a somewhat similar position with Hilara potentially in the future? Lots of fun. The show always can throw these situations at us, and they always lead to drama. They always lead to blood, and we lap it up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why we watch. All right. The last thing we're going to do before we get out of here, the last kind of conversation that we just have to have essentially, is that we just have Doctore. We have Doctore return to the villa. We find out also with this is that it was Cossutia who ordered the hit on Doctore, but the bros, they're reunited. Asher and Doctore, they embrace each other. I think their relationship is strengthened. Doctore was successful in gaining the confidence of Opiter. And then the two of them walk away from this with, we got to kill that rat Proculus. Obviously, it was Proculus. So another thing of a little web of somewhat misunderstanding, a three-way in that way, a love triangle, but it's more a murder triangle of we've got the wrong man, but it'll still benefit us to kill Proculus. So this is where I think that Asher can almost gain a little confidence in a way. Like, this is what he's good at. This is what he does, is scheme and get after people. So I think we'll see him be successful in this vein while he still kind of struggles on the Dominus vein.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't know about you, but I kind of always thought that Doctore was playing Operator. So this wasn't really a huge reveal at the end. It was more of just a confirmation. But I was happy that, they did confirm Doctore is not really being, full. He's not rebelling against Asher. Maybe there's a slight chance that Doctore did like what he heard from Opter, and maybe he will try to maybe at least look into it in the future. But in this moment, I believe that Chorus is fully with Asher, tied to Asher in this moment. And yeah, like they're dead set on killing Proculus. Like this Fides was that guy's hitman. So what are we gonna do? And like you said, Asher's not good at a lot of stuff, but his history shows that he's good at scheming and he's good at taking out enemies. So I would hate to be on the other end of his rage.
Yeah, but Cossutia is cold-blooded too, man.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's going to be Proculus at the start. That's going to be on the end of Asher's schemes and rage. But man, consider Ledger balanced.
Yeah.
Slice. I was like, damn, girl. Okay. I like it. Formidable opponent. Not just with a serpent's tongue, baby. She's willing to get her hands dirty, and you can't do anything but respect it. All right. That's the end of the episode itself coverage. Paul, I believe that we are going to end the same way we ended episode 1 and 2. So like we mentioned, man, TVMA here. All right. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about blood. We're going to talk about all that stuff. So we're going to get into a little Bang, Kill, Marry.
Bang, Kill, Marry, BKM. We did some of the ladies last time. We're going to switch it up and do some of the elites men here. So we're going to have Gabinius, Opiter, and Proculus. So a bunch of fucking terrible options here, if I'm honest. Well, I shouldn't say terrible.
I know my answer. I'm going to marry Gabinius for sure. He is rich. He's a senator. And I think that it endeared me a little bit, the way that he has his relationship with Viridia, his daughter. So I like that. He kind of seems like a nurturer and a provider. And that's some nice traits in a husband for sure. I'm going to bang Opiter because I think it would be a one-night blowout bro down. And it would be probably a lot of fun. And then I'm going to kill Proculus because he's done nothing but show us he's just like a little rat. And he seems also like really high maintenance. So I'm out on that.
Yeah, Proculus is a handsome son of a bitch, but my God, I just hate every scene that he's been in. He is not showing one redeeming quality. So I think I'm also going to kill Proculus. And I was going back and forth. I'm like, do I want to marry Gabinius and have this wealth and high status?
What kind of lifestyle?
Or do I want to marry Opiter and just party all the time and be happy? So I'm probably a sucker. I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to marry Gabinius and then bang Opiter. Luke, I texted him. He hasn't watched episode 3, but he still answered to the BKM. He said he's killing Gabinius. He's banging Opiter, which means he's marrying Proculus. So
interesting. He definitely respects him being like the leading gladiatorial house.
Yes, he's got the position for the games, pretty much. I'm sure Luke's a little schemer, that guy.
Little does he know, baby, he's killing a senator and a banker. What an idiot!
Seriously,
that's why you should watch the episodes, people. Okay, so that is going to be our episode 3 coverage of Spartacus, the House of Ashur. We will be back next week with episode 4. We should be the 3 of us. And also, we've been recording these on Sunday mornings and dropping them on Mondays. We should be able to get them out earlier. So we're hoping that the episode 4 coverage is actually out on Friday. And then hopefully we move to Fridays going forward. So that's just something to look forward to for the future. We might be able to get this coverage to you even earlier than we have been. The other coverage that we're doing here at not only Binge Empire, but Bingetown TV itself is a lot more than just House of Ashur. So Binge Empire is just one feed within the Bingetown TV podcast network. We're also covering it. Welcome to DERRY on the Binge Empire feed. We're also about to be starting Fallout because Fallout begins this week, December 17th. So we will be covering Fallout on Binge Empire. And then also another podcast feed underneath that Bingetown TV network umbrella is going to be The Core. That's where we cover everything on Apple TV. I almost said Apple Television, Apple TV. And Pluribus is, I believe, I just read the most watched TV show ever on Apple TV. Well, we're covering it over on our feed, The Core. So if you're watching that show, go check that out. That is Paulicus and Luciatis with another one of the Bingetown TV members, Jimmy. And what else are we doing? Oh, Unreal. Another feed, a third feed has hit the Bingetown TV podcast network, and that is Unreal. That's where we just randomly cover reality TV shows. We're going to be doing The Traders coming up in the beginning of January. That is a reality TV kind of game show in a way over on Peacock. That'll be me and some of my very good friends, other members of the Bingetown TV team. So all of that is always just to say we do a lot here at Bingetown TV and Binge Empire and the other feeds that we have. So just join us. Check out those other feeds. Check out the other shows that we are covering. I am positive you will find something else that you like. And then to join the conversation, the best way to get involved in that type of stuff is to join our Discord. That's discord.com/BingetownTV. There are, I believe, at this point, 600 people in the Discord. We're talking about pretty much every show that's not only currently airing, but also big shows that are, news is dropping about filming new seasons and when they'll drop and changes in showrunners and all that stuff. We're talking about all of that over on our Discord. So be sure to check out our Discord. And that is all I got. So that's episode 3. We're Binge Empire. And have a good one. We'll see you next week. Actually, we'll see you this week. How about that? Thanks for listening.